All right, everybody, thank you for the nice intro, Riley. And just want to thank you all for joining me. Some of us on the East Coast delayed the day due to the weather. And if none of you here listening know about snow, just count your blessings. It was kind of a rough one. But first, getting into industrial IoT, it's been a very exciting area of ongoing coverage for us. First, we'll start off with why IoT is on the rise. And some background on what's allowing it to emerge now. Then we'll get into some funding trends and some startup segments. So taking a look at where IoT and industrial IoT specifically is driving investment. Then we'll wrap up with some spotlights on drones, fog computing, take a look at some corporate bets and where corporates are finding good investments. And then we'll take a look forward and end with some challenges that the industry is facing. So, beginning on asset-heavy industries. So some of the most capital-intensive industries out there lack digitization. So you can see the bottom of this chart from McKinsey that looks at digitization. Agriculture, construction, hospitality, healthcare. Some of these are very deeply in the red. Mining, chemicals, utilities, maybe a little bit less so, but still, a lot of these have room to have more digitization. And what that means practically, this quote from Jeff Immelt of GE kind of highlights what this might mean. He says, a new jet engine might have 100 sensors on it, and these sensors have the capability to take continuous data about the heat of an engine, fuel consumption, the wear of the blades, the environment it's taking off in, a series of things. And one flight from New York City between New York City and Chicago produces a terabyte of data, and it can produce way more than that depending on the recency of the build of the airplane. And that's really interesting to think about airplanes and new jet engines having sensors. But really, the end game of it, in the Internet of Things, of the IoT, is to think about it as the end chapter being software eats the world. So this quote from Matt Turk, he says, the importance of the IoT perhaps emerges more clearly when you think about it as the final chapter where everything gets connected. And I think that makes a little bit more sense as to how it's being applied to all sorts of industries. So you can see that as far as a means of digitization, any industry out there needs more data on itself. So that can vary from precision agriculture to power grids, cybersecurity, drones, healthcare, manufacturing, construction. All of these will find ways to get more data on themselves, and Internet of Things is just the means of digitizing that process. So you can see that this is more than just manufacturing analytics and making factories optimized. There's adjacent verticals in telecoms, data centers, and agribusiness. All this can be improved with sensor networks. And the reason industrial IoT is coming to prominence right now has a ton of different factors behind it. A lot of that being driven by the smartphone revolution. So there's that excellent quote from Chris Dixon of Andreessen Horowitz, who says, if you disassemble a modern drone, VR headset, or IoT device, you'll find mostly smartphone components. And what he's saying is that, thanks to the smartphone revolution and Moore's Law, the small chips and cheap sensors and cheap networking has allowed those phenomena to be repackaged for collecting data on the physical world. And that's enabling the rise of industrial IoT. So outfitting industrial equipment with sensors is now feasible, and the computing being done on the back end is finally economical. Now, industrial IoT and IoT in general is going to be big, but we're not sure. We always get a good chuckle on the research team at CB Insights when we look at figures from some of these consultants about how many IoT devices there will be, kind of like we do with market sizes, because they vary so widely. So you can see here the predictions at the amount of of the amount of IoT devices by 2020. It can vary from 21 billion to 200 billion. It's a pretty wide range there, but whatever the case, it's slated to be big, especially on the industrial side. So you can take a look at this chart here about the forecast for IoT devices. You can see the green top line there just growing, or at least expected to grow phenomenally by 2025, and probably being the #1 source of connected sensors in less than 10 years' time. So a lot of this work is being done by big incumbents, so especially on the data analytics space, industrial incumbents like GE, PTC, SAP, Cisco, Siemens, and many more. A lot of these are dominating the platform space, and using their blue chip name to go into industrial spaces and digitize them. But that shouldn't thwart any startups from finding a niche within. So we'll take a look at where startups are being financed and the overall trends right now. So since 2012, industrial IoT companies have raised $6.9 billion across nearly 1,000 deals. And you can see here the annual trend is pretty much up and to the right. And it's in 2016, pretty interestingly, the industry saw growth both in deals and dollars when the VC community as a whole kind of tightened its investment. So it's kind of defying that trend there. And overall, the year represented 21% growth in deals, and just barely eclipsed last year as far as dollars invested. But some of the top deals last year included Sigfox, which is a French IoT networking company. They raised $160 million, Series E right there, and another large one, $70 million to C3 IoT, another large platform. And then finally, a pretty interesting deal towards the end of the year with Osterhout Design Group, perhaps better known as ODG. They actually licensed their intellectual property to Microsoft HoloLens, and are starting to expand their industrial smart glass business to do some more consumer stuff as AR, VR kind of proliferates to the side as an adjacent area of the IoT. At the quarterly level, though, the outlook is maybe a little bit less optimistic. You can see that for the last 4 quarters, there's been decline in deals starting from the beginning of 2016. At an annual, at a quarterly level, though, last quarter 4 of 2016 was one of the lowest tallies as far as deals since early 2015. But I have to say, it does seem like it's back on the rebound. There's been some big deals in 2017 already. And Cloud Minds, a cloud robotics company, raised $100 million for a Series A, which is pretty notable. And then SentinelOne, a big endpoint cybersecurity company, a lot of IoT and industrial applications there. They raised a $70 million Series C. And then Desktop Metal, big commercial 3D printing company, raised a $45 million Series C. I'm taking a look at the deal share by the stage. The early stage still dominates a lot of industrial IoT. So you can see that from left to right, it kind of went up and down as far as the seed and Series A. And early stage peaked in 2014 with 59% of deals. And it's kind of held still steady, and seed and Series A was still half or more than half of the deals in 2016. As the industry matures, we'd expect to see more middle stage and late stage deals taking up a larger share of the total there. Looking at the geographies of startups getting that investment, 69% of those are located in the United States, so much more than anything else here. Canada, India, Israel are the next largest locations. And here's a list of the most active investors in the space. So you can see that there's a host of familiar names as far as big industrial and just tech giants in general. A lot of big corporate venture arms like of Qualcomm, Cisco, Google, Intel. There's a ton of strategic value in investing in this space. And we'll get into the corporate angle a little bit later and take a look at where they're looking. And then finally, Techstars and Hacks are some of the leading accelerators with an industrial IoT focus. Here's a chart of the financing history. So you can see that dollars to industrial IoT is starting to become a larger share of the greater IoT dollar spend, if you will. Over time, it's just become a larger share of the industry. Same is true in the deals as well. And here's a list of some of the most well-funded companies that are still private. There's Alien, Sigfox, Tendril, OCSoft, and some of these are working really kind of on the underbelly in RFID tracking, in the connectivity, and smart grid and analytics as well. So taking a look at some of the startup segment trends, we've segmented the industry in the past with our market map, and there's kind of an interesting flow, a very centralized flow of a lot of these endpoints sending their data to the cloud. That's actually starting to change. We'll dig into that later with our little spotlight on fog computing. But in general, yeah, there's a lot of these being translated into how we're looking at the industry now. So here's 9 categories that we've broken it out into. Some of the ones that are most interesting right now: predictive AI and ML analytics. So it's machine learning analytics. A lot of startups are really doing the AI meets IoT platform. Industrial robotics, so robotics that are really more about the physical work than they are about surveying or collecting data. There's inspection drones, also one of the more growing categories. So we'll get into where we're seeing more activity, but first here's just a few that'll typify their respective categories. You can see some of these well-funded and high momentum companies in each of these spaces. So we took a look at the deal share by those definitions, and what we're talking about with IoT and industrial IoT is really just connected sensors that are more than mobile and different than desktop computing. So really small, specialized sensors, and these can take their varying forms here. So we take a look at the core IoT stack. So looking at this graph from 11% down and to the right to the 10%, that goes from the way up the stack from the infrastructure all the way to the AI analytics. That's still representing about 40% of all the deals, and it's kind of held steady in the last few years like that. Whereas a lot of these other devices, these other endpoints or edge sensors, these are starting to take off. So a lot of industrial robotics and drones are taking more than you might expect. So 22 and 20%, a combined 42% going to drones and robotics is pretty significant. And just taking a look from that, those hot categories broken out a little bit. We have AI analytics, cybersecurity, drones, and robotics. And here are a few high momentum companies within those. So really a little spotlight on industrial drones because it's a pretty fascinating space in addition to being pretty high growth. So this tweet from the right, this is drones being used with flamethrowers attached. It's a pretty fascinating video and well worth finding on the internet. But it's kind of interesting is that drones are being used for more than just taking pictures. And I think that's kind of an interesting development when so much of the consumer drone market and people's ideas of what drones are all about taking photos. And this, they're burning debris off of a high voltage line. Pretty interesting application, and there's plenty more too. But the inspection is still a significant part of the ecosystem still. You can see some of the most well-funded startups in drones overall are focused solely on enterprise and industrial inspection. So Airware, Precision Hawk, Skydio, and Airbotics. A lot of these looking at various sites, a lot of them like construction sites to oil and gas inspection, and really almost industry agnostic for some of these. And like I was saying before, these drones are going beyond just photo taking, and here's some interesting designs that are coming out of the startup world. Flyability has a cage around it, and so it's kind of collision ready and can go where humans really shouldn't be. Also, the vertical takeoff and landing, but also combined with the fixed wing, allows for really long inspection and long flight. And so X-Craft, which has a lot of Shark Tank backers, those are just a few. There's also unmanned ground vehicles, pipe inspections done with submersibles. And really what I'm getting at is that there's just a wide variety of ways that industries can digitize themselves and collect better data on themselves. And it can be done in more than just floating around with a camera drone. And what's interesting is that as drones grow more autonomous, there's more room to offer services. So this is from the Airware site. Because they're able to do a full stack approach to drones, they're able to plan the flight plan specifically tailored to the asset being looked at. So in the above case, looking at a telecom telecom pole, and then also at the bottom, the services offered for the mining industry are pretty advanced. So haul road and fuel usage analysis, drilling and blasting planning, safety and compliance monitoring. This is kind of a far cry from maybe just buying a drone and figuring it out with some pictures from above. And autonomy enables that to be possible. And even just the companies focused on hardware alone, a lot of these consumer drone manufacturers like Unique and DJI, Parrot, a lot of these are starting to design new drones and new lines of drones for agriculture and industrial inspection. This one from DJI, it does crop dusting, and actually the agriculture application of drones is a pretty big area, and maybe even deserving of its own time. But you can take a look at what we've covered recently with agriculture tech in our market map here. There's a link at the bottom. Very interesting application and use case. And finally, another spotlight on fog computing. So you can see the right here, OpenFog is a new consortium of companies like Intel, Cisco, Microsoft, Dell, ARM, and several others. And we'll get into what the definition of fog computing is in just a minute. But first, it's important to note that it's on the rise. And there's actually a difference between fog and edge computing, even though they're used rather interchangeably. Edge computers are done more locally, so it's actually computing being done like atop the drone, for example, whereas fog computing would be done locally, but still kind of one level above, kind of like a local area network would function. And there's a really excellent video that will illustrate this, and this idea that cloud computing could be kind of a way of the past. So right now, a lot of things are feeding into a cloud from the distributed things inside an industrial network, but that's about to change. So, and especially true in industrial use cases, you can't really wait for the latency of the cloud to compute whatever you need or in the instructions back, especially if it's a mission critical system like a connected factory or a medical device, or even an autonomous vehicle that is pinging a cloud to ask, should I swerve or keep driving if there's like an obstacle in the way. A lot of this computing needs to be done locally at the edge. So especially with in some of these rural locations where, like say, an industrial connected mine could be, there really isn't any other option. So Peter Levine of A16Z in this really excellent video, he anticipates an end to the cloud for pretty much all of IoT. And data creation is increasing fast, so there's networking bandwidth that's finite, and sending 1 million messages of I'm okay to a cloud and back is really not useful. And thus, fog and satellite computing will solve a lot of these industrial IoT problems currently. And there's a list of just some of the data creation happening, like I said, with the Jeff Immelt quote before about 1 terabyte in just a flight. A new Airbus can generate 2.5 terabytes a day, and certain aircrafts I've seen quoted at 40 terabytes an hour. A typical Formula One car has 150 to 300. Smart cities, like in Santander, they have 25,000 sensors all across the city, just pumping data that needs to be digested, and also, an hour of downtime at a factory can have an immense cost, and so any latency or any problems in not deciphering data immediately can have vast consequences. And some startups that are beginning to look and identify this as an area: Foghorn, OCSoft, Clearblade, VMOC Technologies. These are just a few that are really talking about cloud computing and the way that they describe themselves. And then also more, these companies here, they describe themselves more along the lines of edge computing. So Saguna Networks, Zaptum, Nebbiolo Technologies, and Machine Shop. These ones are actually seem to be even more nascent, with the furthest of these four being a Series B stage company with Saguna. So those are some interesting things what we've been seeing, and now let's take a look at where corporates are making moves. So just to kind of give an idea of how corporates are reinventing themselves, here's a good quote from Doug Oberhelman of Caterpillar. He says, "Our business runs on uptime for our customers. If we do it at a lower cost than our competitors, we win. And if we don't do this, somebody else will. And we decided that maybe we better disrupt ourselves in our own way before somebody does an Uber to us." And corporate participation, from that quote, is an interest in industrial IoT is on the rise. So here's a graph of corporate participation over time. You can see that over to the left, in 2012, 17% of deals involved a corporate, and now it's 31%. So really, from 20 to about a third. Exits are increasing fast in the industry. M&A is most common. 32 deals were done last year, and that translates to about 50% growth year over year. Notably, GE bought Norigo and Bitstu for its Predix platform. There's plenty of other notable M&As being done by those big corporates that we've mentioned before. But here is a visualization using our CB Insights business social graph that maps the connections between companies and investors. This is graphing the top 5 most active corporate venture arms and seeing where they have overlap. And interestingly, Bitstu Systems, which was later acquired by GE, as mentioned, had overlap with Cisco. Sensity Systems, also between those two, Mana and Desktop Metal. Pretty interesting way to take a look at the data there inside our platform. And another interesting thing, going back to that quote from Caterpillar, they're also ramping up themselves as far as how active they are with their venture arm. So they're kind of putting their money where their mouth is. So you can see just in 2010 to 2011, only a handful of investments, and one acquisition, and one investment there, versus now in 2015 and 2016, a lot more activity happening for them, and their investments have ranged bunch of sectors: autonomous robots, exoskeletons with Sarcos, and energy distribution and storage. Really, all sorts of different things. And just a couple news items surrounding the corporate involvement in industrial IoT. There was a huge NXP acquisition by Qualcomm, and let's see, there's GE, Siemens, and are reinventing manufacturing, harnessing the cloud. They saw that manufacturing spend in industrial IoT is one of the leading areas. And then also SoftBank, with their enormous bet on ARM, they're expecting to deliver 1 trillion IoT chips in the next 20 years. Pretty interesting and click-worthy headline there. But there's some adjacent areas for corporates too that aren't quite bread and butter industrial IoT, but they're still very much adjacent. You can take a look at how 3D printing M&A has heated up over the year in 2016 and definitely become a bigger focus. GE announced it acquired in the fall Arcam and SLM for over $1 billion. And then Desktop Metal is one of the biggest deals that we mentioned in 2017 so far. And then last year, there was a big deal to Carbon 3D, which raised an $81 million Series C, and it does SLA 3D printing. Very interesting, very fast, very cool technology there. And another adjacent area that we're seeing more happening is in augmented and virtual reality. We recently mapped the space out, and there was when we mapped out the augmented and virtual reality space, we identified 8 working in heavy industry. DAQRI with its smart hard hats, essentially, that have smart glasses affixed. Athere, similar idea, and same with Upskill. A lot of these are also getting involved with corporates, especially those industrials corporates like the GEs and Caterpillars of the world. So Upskill saw investment from GE and Scope AR, which is more focused on mobile AR, but we'll do live streaming with in the field. So if you're fixing something far away, you'll be able to beam in and have a live expert there with you on the line, and then also use augmented reality to attach using computer vision onto the part in question and help identify and expedite the support process. So a lot of interesting corporate plays being done there. And even in augmented reality alone, there's some cool headlines happening. DAQRI, and in general, HoloLens, Caterpillar. You can take a look at those and the way they're speeding up construction projects, for example. So what does the future of industry look like? We're imagining no delays, no downtime. And what more data and digitization in industry means is that you're able to optimize on that data. So the promise for fleets, factories, and machines, there's predictive maintenance, no unscheduled downtime, the ability to be smart about decision making, optimization of fleet usage, and total maximization of safety. That's just some of the promise. Really less dirty, dangerous, and dull jobs overall. Drones, robotics, and sensors are doing almost all of that now. And factories and warehouses get more automated. Robots like Rethink Robotics, that's pictured here, are starting to become programmable and flexible, and they're automating things that used to be once odd and unautomatable. They're kind of bridging that and adding intelligence to their capability. So challenges to getting to that: slow adoption. I hear this a lot about the industry. These asset-heavy industries are often trend laggards, and they have little immediate incentive to upend their mission-critical systems. Startups will definitely need to convince them of how their bottom lines will be transformed. Cybersecurity, probably the most important item that we've heard in the last year. There was hacks perpetuated with connected factories causing massive damage in Germany. There was that very high-profile DDoS attack using consumer IoT devices. And going forward, this is going to be a huge hurdle in the way of adoption. And as we saw, there was already, I think, 11% of the deals last year going to industrial cybersecurity companies. And then finally, the skills gap. Industrial IoT, by nature, by disrupting those dirty, dull, dangerous jobs, it is in nature disruptive of those working there currently. So it'll mean a lot of retraining will be needed for those workers that are automated out of these jobs, and also new software, these new systems. These require a large change in the education to be able to come up with them and run them effectively. So there was an interesting quote from Siemens floor not long ago that there's no jobs at Siemens today for just high school graduates. And we're going to have education to meet those needs going forward, especially within industry, even though it might not feel like it today. Any questions on this, you can find me online at npapag or email me. And let's see, we're going to take a break for a minute as we take a look and collect some of the questions about the industrial Internet of Things. So just give us a minute here and we'll try to find some interesting things that are on your minds. All right, so someone on the line is asking, how will this affect healthcare? Already we're seeing some interesting things going on with healthcare, especially with just asset tracking inside a hospital. I think I read that 21 minutes of an average shift done by a nurse is done just looking for equipment. So having sensor-laden medical equipment, stretchers throughout the hospital, knowing where patients are, with a really smart connected system. I mean, just think about how much inefficiency could just be squeezed out of that. Also, kind of an interesting related things we're seeing in AR, VR, a lot of healthcare, using training either with AR or total VR, and also even direct treatment. So rehabilitation using, like say for someone with an extreme phobia, having exposure therapy. I think the company Scius is working on that, pretty interesting area. And not to mention 3D printing for casts and bone transplants, and a lot of synthetic biology pieces working with that, as well as robotics. A lot of those exoskeletons that are for people to walk, with assistance. That can be done just as easily for healthcare rehabilitation. And let me take a second here to find some other ones we can get lined up. Okay, so someone was asking about some emerging cases and where they expect the most change to be happening as far as industry goes. As we saw before, I think with the McKinsey graph, construction, agriculture, those are some of the lowest in digitization, both for the labor and for like the process of the product. So definitely the biggest room for improvement as far as the least digitized industries. So just even an incremental improvement in that could mean a very vast business outcome. And so actually it's just some interesting research we've been putting out, I think agriculture tech and construction tech, that's definitely convinced me that could be some of the most interesting emerging spaces right now as far as industrial IoT goes. Just a second while we come up with a couple more. Okay, so I'm seeing a bunch of questions about all right, so I have a couple questions about which, let me see here, which verticals are furthest along in adopting IoT solutions. I've found just from those I've spoken to in the industry that original McKinsey chart is rather accurate as far as digitization goes. Oil and gas being among the most digitized of the heavy industrials. companies, which makes sense, I guess, given the incentives to produce efficiently in that industry. I've also seen, will consumer AR, VR be bigger in IoT than in industrial IoT? I think it's, I mean, will VR or AR be bigger in industrial use cases or consumer? It's hard to say. I've seen some pilots being done, GE and Upskill. I think, I mean, it just makes sense. There's just so many machines out there that it could be bigger, but I'm not sure if I'm in a position to say exactly how big VR, AR will be for it, but it's definitely something it's very interesting, and as far as training goes, could be extremely useful to industry. What are some barriers to slow adoption? I mean, some of these, industrial systems, or SCADA systems, ICS, can be, pre-internet in some ways. They'll be kind of in their own silo as far as networking goes, and is adding, more digitization going to really increase the bottom line of something that works. I think that's kind of the prevailing attitude that you're going to have to combat if you're a startup in the space. There's also, just slow, long tech cycles that require tons of vetting as far as data integrity goes. So these are enormous trade secrets and things like that are being dealt with. And also, the thing is, the status quo is probably the biggest thing you're challenging, is that, a lot of these factories or, opportunities for more digitization to happen. These areas often feel like they have it figured out. They have something that works, and that adding digitization to it might only increase it just a little bit, not enough to justify it, and might even open Pandora's box as far as cybersecurity vulnerabilities go, or something like that. As far as AI, startups working in industrial IoT, a lot of this is just squeezing more juice out of the same data. So in our market map, it's kind of the top or the bottom of the stack, depending how you're talking about it. Something above, the storage of cloud and insights going on, is actually figuring out what's interesting without being explicitly programmed, as far as looking at the vast torrents of industrial data being created across thousands of sensors. You could look at some KPIs for your factory, say, but if we're talking about signaling abnormalities, and increasingly the fog and edge is an opportunity for these for AI companies, because with more computing being done locally, having that intelligence happen at the device level could be extremely useful. Waiting, for, like I said before, like waiting to ping the central cloud to whether or not to swerve to miss an obstacle in an autonomous vehicle. That's going to be done, that decision-making process, while it's centralized now, is going to be increasingly done at the edge, at the endpoint, at the actual autonomous vehicle level, or drone level, or sensor on piece of machinery that's been retrofitted level. All that is going to be done ever more in a distributed sense, in a level that's closer to the device. So that's definitely where I'm seeing a lot of chatter as far as AI and industrial IoT happening. And that seems like a lot of the questions. If you have any other ones that were unanswered, I'm happy to get on Twitter or via email, talk to you about it, and let you know what I'm hearing. Always very interesting topic, and I love talking to you all about it. So please just ping me online or on email, and we'll try to get to your questions. So thank you again for your time, and I look forward to giving you an update again. We'll have more research coming out in between now and our next one. And I highly recommend checking out some of the linked pieces in this presentation. There's some really excellent research being done in those adjacent categories like AR, VR, construction tech, ag tech, as well as mobility that are well worth checking out our coverage on. So thanks again for your time, and I look forward to doing it again. Appreciate it.